Section 4.7 deals with applications and problem solving. In other words, we're solving applied problems. And it begins with number one. The first exercise is on credit card transactions. And so here there were a total of 30.7 billion US credit card transactions in 2012. The number of transactions in 2015 was 33.8 billion. The question is, how many more credit card transactions were there in 2015 than in 2012? So our first step is we familiarize ourselves with the problem situation. And so let's just say C is the number of how many more credit card transactions there were in 2015 than in 2012. So C stands for how many more credit card transactions there were in 2015 than in 2013. Next, we want to translate the problem into a mathematical statement. So we translate the problem as follows. The number of credit card transactions in 2012 plus additional credit card transactions is equal to the number of credit card transactions in 2015. So the number of credit card transactions in 2012 was 30.7 billion. Plus C, the additional credit card transactions, means equal, and now the number of credit card transactions in 2015 is 33.8 billion. So now we're going to solve this equation. 30.7 plus C equals 33.8. So we subtract 30.7 on both sides of the equation to isolate C. And so it's 33.8 minus 30.7. So on the left side now we only have C because 30.7 minus 30.7 is 0. So C equals in 33.8 minus 30.7. So 33.8 minus 30.7 is 3.1 billion. So we can check our calculations by adding 30.7 plus 3.1 equals 33.8. So that checks. So then we state our answer. Based on our calculations of the difference being 3.1, we state now there were 3.1 billion more credit card transactions in 2015 than in 2012. In the next exercise, we have 1 pound of lean boneless ham. It contains 4.5 servings. It costs $7.99 per pound. What is the cost per serving? Round to the nearest cent. So let's familiarize ourselves with the situation. And so we can say that C is the cost per serving. Cost per serving. So let's visualize this and say, okay, so here's our ham. So it doesn't look like ham, but it is. So here's 1 serving, here's 2 servings, 3 servings, 4 servings, and this is 1/2 serving. So it's 4.5 servings, 4.5 servings. And all this weighs 1 pound. Okay. So we can then say, okay, we can translate this and say that 4.5 servings per pound times the number of servings, the cost per serving equals $7.99 per pound. So in other words, this would be 4.5 times C, our cost, that is C here, our cost per serving. 4.5 times C equals $7.99. So let's solve this equation for C. So we have 4.5 times C equals $7.99. And to isolate C, we divide by 4.5 on both sides. So 4.5 times C divided by 4.5 equals 7.99 divided by 4.5. So the 4.5's cancel. So on the left side we have C, we've isolated C, and 7.99 divided by 4.5 is 1.7755, etc. So that's equal to 1.775 with a bar, because that is a repeating pattern. And now we are rounding it to nearest cent, so that is 178. Because the 7 is followed by 5, so we round the 7 up to an 8. We can check our calculations, and that is we multiply 4.5 times 1.78 which is equal to 8.01, which means it's within 2 cents of the actual amount. Of course, due to rounding the 1.77555 to 1.78, so that's due to rounding error, so that checks. So we state our result, and that is the cost per serving. The cost per serving is $1.78. In the next exercise, we're talking about printing cost. At quick copy, the cost of copying is 11 cents per page. How much in dollars would it cost to make 466 copies? Let's say that C is the cost to make 466 copies. Then we think about what it means, 11 cents per page. So for one page, we pay 1 time 11 cents. Or copies wise, for 2 copies, there should be. So for 1 copy, would 1 times 11 cents. For 2 copies, it would 2 times 11 cents. And then for any number of copies, for n copies, it's n times 11 cents. So then we translate and say for 466 copies, then n equals 466. So 466 times cost per copy, $0.11 equals the total cost of making 466 copies. In other words, 466 times 11 cents equals C, the cost to make 466 copies. Next, we're going to solve the equation 466 times 11 cents equals C, and 466 times 11 is 5,126 cents equals C. Since 1 cent is equal to 1/100th of a dollar, we replace 1 cent by 1/100th of a dollar to get our result in dollars. So 5,126 times 1/100th of a dollar equals C. And so here we have 2 zeros in the denominator, which means we move the decimal 2 places to the left. So then we have $51.26 for the total cost of making 466 copies. And to check, we repeat calculations. And then check. So now we state our result, our answer. It would cost so the statement is it would cost $51.26 to make 466 copies. The next example is about bank balance. Stephen had $915.22 in his checking account. He used his debit card to pay a charge card minimum of $36 and to make purchases of $67.50, $178.22, and $429.05. He then deposited his weekly pay of $570.91. How much was in his account after these transactions? So let's proceed like this. We first find the total debits. So total debits. Then we subtract the total debits from his balance in the checking account. And then we finally add the deposit for his weekly pay of $570.91. In other words, this is a three-step process. We find the total debits, subtract it from the checking account balance. That's the second step, and the third step would be to add the weekly pay. So the total debits consist of the $36 we used to pay a charge card minimum, and then the other purchases of $67.50, $178.23, and $429.05. That total is equal to $710.78. Step 2 is we subtract it from the checking account balance. The checking account balance was $915.22. So we do the calculation of $915.22 minus $710.78. It's a minus. So that's equal to 4, 11 minus 7 is 4, 1 here, and there would be another, so it becomes a 4, and 1, 0, and 9 minus 7 is 2, so that's $204.44. That's step number 2, so step number 1, this step number 2. And step number 3 is then we add to this balance now the weekly pay. So step number 3, we have the balance of 204. So that's the account balance after we subtracted the debits. So we start with that, and now we add his weekly pay of $570.91, and that is equal to 5, 3, carry 1, 5, 7, and 2 plus 5 is 7. So the balance that's in his account after these transactions, $775.35. To check, we recalculate. Everything we've done, adding up the debits, those 4 numbers, and that does check. We subtracted from the original bank balance of $915.22, and that checks too. And now we add the weekly pay, and that checks as well. So we are good. So we state our result. So we state there was $775.35 in Steve's account after these transactions. In the next example, we are to compute the gas mileage. John filled his gas tank and noted that the odometer read 38,320.8 miles. After the next fill up, the odometer read 38,735.5 miles. It took 14.5 gallons to fill the tank. How many miles per gallon did John get between fill-ups? So we can think about the odometer reading in the beginning, when he filled up, it said 38,320.8. Then he drove, let's say, n miles between the fill-ups, n miles, and then he gassed up with 14.5 gallons, 14.5 gallons. And so at the next point, his odometer reading was 38,735.5. So let n be the number of miles driven. And once we know that, then we can divide by the number of gallons to get the miles per gallon. So it's a two-step process. So in other words, with the first odometer reading, so what we have here is the first odometer reading plus the number of miles driven is equal to the second odometer reading. And now we plug in the numbers. So 38,320.8 plus n equals 38,735.5. To isolate n, to solve this equation for n, we subtract 38,320.8 on both sides. In other words, n is equal to 38,735.5 minus 38,320.8, which means n is equal to. So he drove 414.7 miles. To get the miles per gallon, m, let's say m miles per gallon, so we simply divide 414.7 by the number of gallons, and there was 14.5, and this then is equal to 28.6. So that's our miles per gallon. To check, we multiply the number of gallons times the miles per gallon. Multiply so we're multiplying the miles per gallon times the number of gallons. 28.6 times 14.5 is equal to 414.7. That's miles driven on 14.5 gallons of gas. And then we add that number of miles to the original odometer reading. So now we add 38,320.8 plus 414.7, and that is equal to 38,735.5. So in other words, that is correct. We are now at the second odometer reading, and so the gas mileage checks. Gas mileage checks. All the numbers are correct. So remember, this was a gas mileage, 28.6. So now we state we answer the question. John got 28.6 miles per gallon. Between fill-ups. So here we have the concluding check, adding the original odometer reading and the miles driven, and that gives us the ending odometer reading when we looked at it again. And so now we state that John got 28.6 miles per gallon between fill-ups. This is the end of section 4.7, and this is also the end of chapter 4. Let me just add something here in conclusion to section 4.7 in particular. And obviously that involved a lot of application problems. And so to develop some proficiency in these applied problems, I would really recommend, as I've before, to go to a particular section, section 4.7. And so on pages 271, 272, 273, and so on, 274 and even 275, there are all kinds of practice exercises you can do. And, doing all of course, it would be wonderful, but most of you perhaps don't have the time to do that. But just maybe do 2 or 3 or even half a dozen of these exercises, and you will definitely get better at doing word problems, because that's what we're dealing with here, with word problems. They do require a little bit of deeper thinking in many cases, but I'm also convinced that you can learn how to do that.